Let me introduce you to my big friend. This is a Yamaha 115 horsepower, 4-stroke outboard. And when I'm fishing by myself, it's my best friend. I gotta tell you why, because I rely on it to get me to my fishing spots and then back home when I'm done fishing. So it's gotta be running efficiently, and it's gotta be like clockwork. The reason I've got the cowling off is because I wanna show you where the oil filter is right here. I personally like to do my own oil changes. It's actually easier to change the oil in a 4-stroke outboard like this one than it is your car engine. So, but one thing I've gotta caution you on, just because you drain the oil pan doesn't mean that you get all the old oil out. So I like to make sure that all the old oil is out when I put the new oil in so that my engine is running as efficient as possible. Now, I have Ryan with me. He's from BlueChem, and he's going to explain to you how to do that.
When we talk about removing all the contaminated and old used oil out of the engine, what we really want to make sure is that we don't rip away the lubrication that's there already. Safely, what we want to do is remove that contaminated old oil to allow the new oil to work to its full potential. So what we're going to show you here is essentially what old oil does within the engine when we change it. That old oil, as it gets aged and used, does build up contamination. The problem being is that the contamination only resides and sticks to the walls when we go to drain our old oil out. When we drain as much as possible, as you said, Italo, the problem is that we can only drain out what will draw. This is what stays inside the tubes, inside your oil pan, and inside the engine. When we add new oil into the engine, what happens is that new oil wants to clean up as much as it can of the old remnants of contamination. That being a problem is because that new oil goes into the engine and instantly becomes dark and dirty like old oil. So now, before we actually do the draining of the oil, what we're going to do is again show you what would be our old oil in the engine, but prior to actually draining it, we're going to add BlueChem's oil system cleaner into our engine with the old oil. What we're going to do is actually break down the contamination so that it can drain out more fluidly with the old oil prior to adding new oil in, so that we can get the new oil to activate to its full potential. So by adding this in, what we're going to do is break down the contamination that's actually within the oil system so that we can drain more of that contaminated oil out, freeing up piston rings, allowing the oil passages to breathe and the oil to flow and work to its full potential with the required amounts. So when we drain this out, what we're doing is we're still draining out oil, and we haven't stripped out any lubrication because there's no simple alcohols in our products to strip lubrication out of the engine, but we are draining a lot more of the contaminated oil out of the engine prior to adding new oil. So that now, when we add new oil into the engine, as so, we can't remove all contamination because that would be bad. That would be stripping lubrication out. But what we can do is make sure that all that oil, that new oil, doesn't have to clean as much dirty oil as it did before. So that's the difference between a regular oil change and an oil change with BlueChem oil system cleaner.